I used to feel like a shadow in my own house. Everyone else in my family seemed to shine so brightly, and I was just there. My mom, Evelyn, had this way of dismissing me with a single glance, like I wasn't worth her breath. My dad, Trent, wasn't much better. He'd nod along with whatever my mom said, and rarely looked at me unless it was to point out something I'd done wrong. My older sister, Cassidy, was the golden girl. She walked into a room and instantly got all the attention, all the compliments, all the praise. And then there was Gavin, my brother, loud, confident, always talking about money and business ideas, even when he had nothing to show for it. Me? I was Sloane, quiet, observant, the one they forgot to include in conversations, the one who had to remind them that I existed. It hurt more than I ever let on. Birthdays came and went, and my gifts were always something thoughtless. A gift card, a sweater 2 sizes too big, once even a notebook with Cassidy's name still scribbled inside from when she didn't want it. But when Cassidy's birthday rolled around, they threw dinner parties and posted family photos online like we were perfect. Gavin got cars, expensive watches, even help with a down payment once. I can still remember one night at dinner when I tried to share some good news. I'd gotten a small scholarship for a class I was excited about, and I said, "Guess what? I just got," but before I could finish, Cassidy cut me off to show off a new bracelet, and Mom leaned in to admire it like I hadn't even spoken. Dad laughed and raised his glass to Gavin, who had just been bragging about some business pitch. My words were swallowed whole by their noise. That's how it always was, invisible. The only person who ever made me feel like I mattered was Grandpa Harlan. He saw me in a way nobody else did. He'd sit with me on the porch, hand me a root beer, and ask, "So, kiddo, what's on your mind today?" And he would actually listen, really listen. He taught me how to fix things, like his old radio, and he'd say, "You've got a patient mind, Sloane. That's rarer than gold." I held on to those words like they were a lifeline. When Grandpa passed, it felt like the only person who ever stood in my corner had been ripped away. I thought maybe the funeral would bring my family closer, maybe soften them, but it did. Instead, Mom made a point of telling me, right there in the car after the service, "Don't expect anything from the will, Sloane. You know your grandfather loved you, but he'd never burden you with responsibilities you can't handle." I didn't. I just stared out the window, my jaw tight, pretending her words didn't sting. But inside, a small voice whispered, "She's wrong." And for the first time in my life, I believed. Growing up, I always knew where I stood in my family. My mom had this way of holding up Cassidy and Gavin like trophies, while I was just extra. Cassidy was the shining star. She had this bubbly laugh, always surrounded by friends, and Mom would beam at her like she was the pride of our bloodline. Gavin was the golden son, loud, charming in a careless way, full of confidence even when he hadn't done a thing to earn it. Dad ate it up, bragged about Gavin's business mind, even though most of his ventures ended in failure. And then there was me, Sloane, the soft one. That was Mom's favorite word for me, soft, like it was an insult. She'd say, "You'll never survive out there if you don't toughen up." If I cried, she called me dramatic. If I spoke up, she said I was being rude. If I stayed quiet, she accused me of sulking. There was no version of me that was ever enough for them. I still remember this one Thanksgiving clear as day. I'd spent hours baking a pie from scratch. Grandpa helped me with the recipe, showing me how to get the crust just right. I was so proud, waiting for everyone to try it. But when dessert came around, Mom brushed past it and made a big deal out of Cassidy's store-bought cheesecake. "Isn't she amazing?" Mom said, serving everyone slices while my pie sat untouched at the end of the table. I wanted to cry, but Grandpa gave me this small nod, like he knew exactly what I was feeling, and whispered, "Don't let them decide your worth, kiddo." Those words stuck with me, even when the favoritism became unbearable. Gavin once wrecked Dad's truck after sneaking out to a party, and instead of grounding him, Dad laughed and called it a learning experience. When I accidentally dented a door trying to carry groceries in, I got a lecture about being careless. It was like two different sets of rules existed in that house, and I was always on the losing side. It wasn't just about chores or mistakes. It was about the bigger picture too. My parents would openly talk about inheritance, like it was a prize for being their favorite. Mom once said, right in front of me, Cassidy and Gavin will carry the family forward. Sloane doesn't need that responsibility. She's not built for it. They thought they were protecting me by cutting me out, but really they were making it clear I didn't count. The only person who believed in me was Grandpa Harlan. He treated me like I had value, even when no one else did. He'd call me his steady hand whenever I helped him with paperwork or repairs around the ranch. One day, just weeks before he got sick, he asked me to drop off some documents at the bank. He gave me a look, serious but gentle, and said, "You'll understand one day why this matters." I didn't question it at the time. I just did as he asked. I didn't know it then, but that small moment would change everything. The day of the will reading felt colder than it should have. I remember sitting in the back seat of Mom's SUV, staring out the window as we drove into the city. Nobody spoke to me. Cassidy was scrolling through her phone. Gavin was humming to himself like he was already celebrating, and Mom kept adjusting her sunglasses, lips curled in that satisfied little smile of hers. When we pulled up to the law office, she turned to me and said almost casually, "Sloane, don't set yourself up for disappointment. Your grandfather loved you, but he wasn't going to leave you with responsibilities you can't handle." Her voice had that sharp sweetness to it, like she was pretending it was kindness when it was really just a dig. I clenched my jaw and said nothing. Inside, the conference room looked too polished, too official, like it belonged to people who actually matter. A long wooden table stretched down the center, leather chairs tucked neatly underneath. At the head sat Marion Klein, Grandpa's lawyer. She had a small stack of papers and a sealed envelope in front of her. The air felt heavy, like the whole room was holding its breath. Before Marion could even start, Mom spoke up. Loud enough for everyone to hear, she said, "Let's not drag this out. Sloane knows she's not included." Then she glanced at Cassidy and Gavin, grinning as if she'd just told a joke. My stomach twisted, but I stayed quiet. Dad chuckled under his breath and added, "It's for the best. Not everyone's cut out to handle property or money." Cassidy leaned back in her chair, twirling her hair. "It's fine, Sloane. You can visit us at the ranch any time. I'll even let you ride my horse." She smirked, like she'd already claimed it all. Gavin, without even looking up from his phone, muttered, "First thing I'm doing is putting the place on Airbnb. Easy money." Every word felt like another shove, like they wanted me to shrink smaller and smaller in that chair until I disappeared. My hands tightened around Grandpa's old pocket knife on my keychain, the one I always carried. I kept my face calm, but inside, I was burnt. Marion cleared her throat, clearly annoyed by the interruptions. "If we could begin?" she said firmly. She opened the file and started reading the formal statements, the list of assets, the usual legal word. My family leaned in eagerly, whispering and nudging each other whenever a big number came up. But me, I sat still, silent, listening, because something in my gut told me Grandpa wouldn't have left me with nothing. He wasn't like them. He knew me. He saw. Still, in that moment, sitting there with my family laughing and mocking me before the will was even read, it felt like betrayal layered on betrayal. Not just from them, but from the possibility that maybe they were right. Maybe I really had been cut out of his life, after all. And the thought of that was almost too much to bear. Marion's voice cut through the tension in the room. "There's one more document," she said, sliding a sealed envelope across the table. The flap had Grandpa's shaky handwriting on it, to be read last. My family leaned forward like vultures, convinced it was just a sentimental goodbye. But my chest tightened. I knew Grandpa never did anything without a reason. Mom smiled, smug as ever. "This should be quick," she muttered. Marion broke the seal and unfolded the letter, her tone steady as she read aloud. "To my family, this final amendment reflects my true wishes." The room grew still. I swear I could hear Cassidy's bracelet clinking against the chair as she fidgeted. Marion continued, "After careful thought, I leave the Hartley Ranch, all associated accounts, and my remaining patents to my granddaughter, Sloane Hartley. She is to serve as sole beneficiary and executor of my estate." The words hit like a thunderclap. Mom's smile froze in place. Dad straightened in his chair, his jaw tightening. Cassidy's mouth fell open, and Gavin finally looked up from his phone, blinking like he hadn't heard right. "What?" Mom snapped. "That has to be a mistake." Marion didn't even flinch. "There is no mistake. This amendment was signed, witnessed, and recorded." I sat there, my heart racing, trying to keep my face calm while inside every nerve in my body screamed with relief. Grandpa hadn't forgotten me. He had seen me all along. Marion read on. "Sloane is the only one who showed me care without condition. She protected my privacy, respected my choices, and proved her integrity. I trust her to carry forward what I've built." Gavin scoffed. "Integrity. Come on. She can't even." Marion raised a hand, silencing him. "Furthermore, there is a safe deposit box containing records and recordings of attempts to coerce me. Those files are now under Sloane's control." That's when the color drained from my parents' faces. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it again, eyes darting between Dad and Marion. Cassidy shifted uncomfortably, chewing her lip. Gavin leaned back, suddenly quiet. For once, I had the power. Marion finished reading and slid a small brass key across the table toward me. My hand trembled slightly as I picked it up, the weight of it heavier than gold. I felt everyone's eyes burning into me, waiting for me to break, to say it was too much, to hand it back. But I didn't. I held it firm. Mom finally spoke, her voice sharp, cracking at the edges. "This isn't fair. Sloane can't handle this. She doesn't know what she's doing." I met her eyes for the first time that day and said quietly, "Maybe you never thought I could, but Grandpa did." The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. The room exploded the second Marion finished reading. Mom shot out of her chair, her voice shaking. No, this can't be right. Harlan would never cut out his own children for her." She jabbed a finger in my direction like I wasn't even part of the family, just some stranger who had wandered in. Dad leaned forward, his palms pressed flat against the table. "This amendment must be confusing. Maybe Harlan was pressured, maybe he wasn't in his right mind." His voice was deep, steady, but I could see the vein in his neck pulsing. He wasn't calm, he was desperate. Cassidy looked like she'd swallowed glass. "You mean I don't get the ranch?" "I was supposed to host parties there, Mom." "This is insane." Her voice cracked, more whiny than angry. But her eyes flicked toward me like I had personally stolen it out of her hands. And Gavin, of course, leaned back in his chair with a bitter laugh. "You've got to be kidding me. All this time and Grandpa gives it to her. What's she even going to do with it? Knit sweaters for the cows?" The insults rolled off me like water, but my chest was pounding. I gripped the brass key in my pocket, reminding myself it was real. It was mine. Marion cleared her throat, cutting through the chaos. Miss Hartley anticipated challenges, which is why he left further proof. She reached into her folder, pressed a button on a small recorder, and suddenly Grandpa's voice filled the room. It was shaky, old, but steady enough. "If you're hearing this, then I'm gone. I know my decision may upset some of you, but I have my reasons. Sloane has shown me patience, kindness, and respect when others tried to strong-arm me. She is the only one I trust to carry this forward." Hearing his voice nearly broke me. I had to bite the inside of my cheek just to keep from crying. Across the table, Mom's face twisted like she'd been slapped. Dad muttered something under his breath, but the recording went on. I was pressured, pushed, and told how to spend my own legacy. I've kept records of those conversations, and they are stored safely. If anyone contests this, those files will speak louder than I ever could. The message ended with a soft click, and the silence that followed was suffocating. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Finally, Marion spoke again, calm and firm. "The amendment is airtight. Any attempt to challenge it will only bring those records to light." I watched the fight drain out of them, one by one. Mom's hands trembled as she clutched her pearls. Dad leaned back in defeat. Cassidy slumped in her chair, and Gavin shoved his phone back into his pocket without a word. I took a deep breath, looked straight at Marion, and said, "Can I see the deed packet now?" My voice didn't shake, and just like that, the power in the room shifted. For the first time, it belonged to me. When the meeting finally ended, I sat there for a moment, staring at the papers spread out in front of me. My name was written across the top of every document, Not Cassidy's, not Gavin's, not Mom's or Dad's. For the first time in my life, something belonged to me, and nobody could talk over it, laugh it off, or snatch it away. Marion slid the folder toward me. "These are copies of everything you'll need to move forward," she said softly, like she knew the weight of the moment. I nodded, swallowing hard as I gathered the papers into my arms. Mom's voice broke the silence, sharp and trembling. "Sloan, think carefully. You don't understand how much work the ranch is. You're not ready for this. Hand it over to us, and we'll manage it for you." I looked right at her. For years, I would have dropped my eyes, folded into myself, stayed quiet, but not now. "No," I said firmly. Just one word, but it felt like a wall slamming shut between us. Cassidy tried next, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. "Come on, Sloan. You don't even ride horses. What would you do with a ranch that size? You could sign it over and still get a little money. We could make it work for everyone." I almost laughed at the desperation in her voice. "I don't think you understand," I told her, standing and sliding the papers into my bag. "This isn't yours to bargain with. Not anymore." Dad stayed quiet, his jaw clenched, but the look he gave me said everything. He wasn't proud, he wasn't impressed, he was angry. Angry that I had slipped through their control. For the first time, that anger didn't scare me. I turned to Marion. "I'd like all future communication to go through you. If they have questions, they can reach out to you directly." "Of course," she said with a small nod. I stood there, papers under my arm, key in my pocket, and I felt lighter than I'd ever felt walking out of a room with my family. I didn't owe them an explanation, and I didn't owe them another piece of myself. As I reached the hallway, I pulled out my phone. My fingers shook, but not from fear, from excitement. I dialed the ranch foreman, Reese, the man who had worked for Grandpa for years. When he answered, his voice was warm and familiar. "Sloan, everything all right?" "Yeah," I said, my throat tight with emotion. "I'm the new trustee now. Grandpa left it all to me. I just wanted to check in, make sure payroll is covered, and see what repairs need attention first." There was a pause, then a smile in his voice. "He always said you'd be the one to take care of this place. We'll be ready when you..." I stepped out of the building into the sunlight, clutching Grandpa's letter in one hand and the key in the other. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I was free, and this time, the future belonged to me. And that's how everything changed for me. What started as another moment of being dismissed turned into the day I finally found my voice, thanks to the one person who always believed in me. If this story touched you, I'd love for you to subscribe, like, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that they're stronger than people think. Your support means more than you know, and it helps me keep bringing you more stories of revenge, drama, and those powerful life lessons we all carry with us. I also want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a moment where people underestimated you, only for life to turn the tables? Share your story in the comments. I promise, this is a place where your voice matters. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for being part of this little community we're building together. Until next time, take care of yourself, and never forget your worth.